The earth lay newly settled on my husband Robert's resting place when his brother Marcus approached me, his grip on my hand just a bit too firm. As tears traced paths on my cheeks, I looked into his eyes searching for solace, but instead he sank to one knee before me, in full view of everyone gathered in mourning. My breathing hitched, a paralyzing shock seizing me as he produced a small, dark velvet box from his jacket. "Eleanor," Marcus murmured, his voice soft yet carrying clearly to those nearby. "Robert would have wanted you looked after. I promise you'll never face hardship alone. Be my wife, Eleanor." Time seemed to halt. Soft gasps rippled through the crowd of friends and family, but the only sound in my ears was the frantic drumming of my own heart, the heat of deep humiliation flooding my face, and the staggering disbelief that someone I'd considered family could desecrate my grief so blatantly, so callously. In that dreadful, suspended moment, I uttered nothing. Yet, what I uncovered later that evening altered the course of everything. Before continuing, we appreciate you letting us know where you're joining us from in the comments. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more compelling narratives. My existence before Marcus's jarring proposal felt like a cherished novel, a narrative I treasured, never conceiving how rapidly it could be torn apart. Robert and I married young, just out of university at 22, full of optimism and shared aspirations. The initial years presented challenges, but our bond proved stronger. We navigated every obstacle together, each trial forging a deeper connection, affirming that our love could withstand whatever life presented. Robert wasn't flawless, but he was the perfect partner for me. His humor had a way of catching me delightfully unaware. He was thoughtful enough to leave little notes beside my morning tea, and his protectiveness was a quiet, steady presence. Prior to our marriage, I'd been deeply immersed in art history, even beginning postgraduate work, but life's demands, including supporting Robert's ambitious career, set that passion aside. Occasionally, I'd try to revisit my studies, but Marcus once quipped to Robert, "Why does Eleanor need to dwell on dusty paintings? She has you creating the future." Robert hadn't paid it much mind then, but the remark left a bitter taste. I recall countless evenings drifting asleep against his chest, calmed by the steady cadence of his heart, utterly secure in the belief that nothing could truly harm us as long as we were together. As we transitioned through life's stages, our family expanded. Our daughter Chloe arrived first, inquisitive and fiercely independent, echoing Robert's own spirit. Then came Liam 2 years later, introspective and observant, resembling me in nature, but a striking physical likeness of his father. Raising them was our paramount joy and challenge. From school plays and sports events to navigating teenage turbulence and first heartbreaks, we were partners in parenting. Robert consistently bolstered my confidence, reminding me of my inherent strength when I faltered. Professionally, Robert excelled as an architect. His composed manner and innate empathy attracted clients who placed immense faith in him. At home, he remained that constant, stable, affectionate, reliable. We crafted a comfortable existence together, filled with an abundance of love shared openly. Our home frequently resonated with laughter during backyard gatherings, holiday feasts, and birthday celebrations, warmed by the presence of cherished friends and family. Marcus, Robert's junior by 3 years, was invariably present. Tall, possessing an easy charm, and more outgoing than Robert, his boisterous laugh and engaging anecdotes often commanded attention. Robert and Marcus were close, or so it appeared. Marcus, perpetually single and drifting between relationships, often commented, sometimes jokingly, sometimes with a harder edge, about envying Robert's settled life, lovely family, and what seemed like our idyllic marriage. I remember organizing a family trip a few years prior. I suggested a peaceful lakeside retreat, a location holding personal significance from my youth. Marcus, visiting at the time, immediately countered, "Robert, my friend, you need adventure. Let's go skiing again, like last year. Eleanor, darling, you'll enjoy it too. Surely you wouldn't want to be stuck alone?" Robert, always keen on activity, easily agreed, and my suggestion was overlooked. Marcus was always volatile, shifting jobs frequently, engaging in fleeting romances. Robert often provided financial support. I recall a discussion not long before Robert's passing. "He lost again, Eleanor," Robert confessed wearily upon returning late one night. "That same underground card game at the Rusty Anchor pub. He insists the debt isn't large, just a few thousand, and promises it's the absolute last time." A knot of apprehension formed within me. "Robert, perhaps it's time to stop rescuing him. He needs to learn accountability." Robert let out a long breath. "He's my brother, Eleanor. I can't just let him sink." Yet, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his features, a nuance I failed to fully register then. That supposedly minor debt would eventually reveal itself as merely the surface of a much deeper problem. About a year before Robert died, we hosted a small dinner party. The lighting was low, candles casting a warm glow. Marcus, having indulged in perhaps too much wine, lifted his glass towards me, his smile overly broad, his usual charm feeling strained. "Eleanor," he declared, his words slightly slurred, "you are absolutely stunning tonight. Robert, you lucky dog, but don't get complacent." There was an undercurrent in his voice, a possessive quality that made me deeply uncomfortable. I felt my cheeks flush. Robert managed a strained laugh but gave his brother a brief, sharp look. Later, when we were alone, I ventured, "Marcus acts so strangely sometimes." Robert simply drew me close. "He just doesn't know how to pay a compliment properly, darling. Don't give it another thought." But a tiny sliver of unease remained lodged within me. When Chloe and Liam left for university, Robert and I began rediscovering life as a couple whose children had flown the nest. This period drew us even closer. We started taking long walks each evening, hand in hand, talking about our future hopes. We dreamed of destinations postponed for family needs, Tuscany, the Greek Isles, the charming coastal house Robert always spoke of building. Our aspirations felt more attainable, almost palpable. Our connection settled into something quieter yet more profound, built upon decades of shared history, mutual esteem, and deep companionship. And then, with shocking suddenness, everything fractured on what seemed like an ordinary weekday morning. Robert collapsed while preparing tea, a catastrophic aneurysm, the doctors later determined. There were no preceding signs, no chance for farewells. Just an abrupt, chilling void that left me feeling hollowed out, stunned, and utterly adrift. In a matter of hours, the life we had meticulously constructed over years evaporated, leaving behind vacant rooms and an oppressive silence. In the ensuing days, grief threatened to consume me. Friends, relatives, and Marcus rallied around, offering support, or so I initially perceived. Marcus, in particular, seemed omnipresent, taking charge of arrangements, greeting visitors, dealing with the necessary paperwork that I felt too emotionally fractured to face. At that point, I felt a sense of gratitude, appreciating that Robert's brother was willing to manage things while I navigated the raw reality of Robert's absence. The funeral occurred sooner than anticipated, a somber gray day marked by subdued weeping and aching goodbyes. As I stood beside Robert's grave, numb with loss yet vaguely comforted by the surrounding presence of loved ones, Marcus remained near, too near, although I didn't recognize it then. Standing by the newly covered grave, I still clung to a belief in the fundamental goodness of those around me, oblivious that I stood mere moments from a betrayal that would not only demolish my sense of safety, but also challenge every conviction I held about loyalty, kinship, and affection. It was in that setting he made his outrageous proposal over the grave. My world tilted. Shame burned my face as shocked whispers spread through the mourners. In that horrific, dreamlike instant, I remained mute. But my later discovery changed everything. The first undeniable indicator, the one I couldn't simply dismiss, occurred almost a year before Robert passed, during our 21st wedding anniversary party. Robert had orchestrated an intimate affair at our home, inviting our dearest friends and relatives. The house buzzed with warmth, laughter, and the gentle murmur of familiar voices. Candlelight danced across the dining table. Bouquets adorned every available surface, and cherished photographs of Robert and me. From our wedding day, various travels, significant moments with our children, graced the walls. It was utterly perfect. During the meal, Robert stood, gently tapping his wine glass. A hush fell over the room, and I felt a warm blush rise as he started speaking. "Eleanor, these past 21 years represent the pinnacle of my life," he stated, his voice imbued with sincerity and warmth. "Every single moment, every hurdle we've overcome together, every happiness we've shared, I wouldn't exchange any of it. You are my closest confidant, my partner, the cornerstone of my life, and I hope you truly grasp how profoundly thankful I am each day." His heartfelt words brought tears to my eyes, the soft kind born of pure contentment. I smiled, squeezed his hand tightly, and felt a surge of deep gratitude for the life we had forged side by side. As our friends applauded and lifted their glasses, Marcus abruptly rose, capturing everyone's focus. Robert looked at him with curiosity, but offered a welcoming smile, ready for whatever his younger brother intended to share. Marcus held his glass aloft, a faint smirk playing on his lips that I'd always found unsettling. That blend of surface charm and underlying sharpness, making his true motives hard to decipher. "A toast to my favorite couple," Marcus began with practiced ease. "You know, observing Robert and Eleanor has always provided me with a standard to aim for. Robert possesses the ideal wife, the ideal family, the ideal existence. One can't help but feel a twinge of envy." Soft laughter circulated the table. Marcus was known for his occasionally bold humor, so no one initially sensed anything amiss. But Marcus didn't conclude there. He turned directly to Robert, his expression strangely intense beneath the smile. "You know, Robert, should you ever decide you want to change, or if, God forbid, something were to happen to you, rest assured Eleanor wouldn't need to search far for her next husband. I would be more than willing to step right in and continue where you left off." The remark lingered heavily in the air. My smile felt stiff and unnatural. My heart performed an uncomfortable lurch. Around me, the laughter became strained, mixed with audible gasps, hushed whispers, and uncertain glances exchanged between guests. Robert paused, visibly taken aback by the unexpected nature of the comment. But Robert, ever the diplomat, swiftly deflected with humor, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "Careful there, Marcus." Robert chuckled, skillfully diffusing the awkwardness. "Or I might reconsider your invitation to our next anniversary." More laughter erupted, easing the immediate tension. But my unease persisted. I briefly met Marcus's eyes, anticipating some acknowledgement of his inappropriate jest, but he simply held my gaze, his look so intense it sent a shiver down my spine. There was an unmistakable quality there, something almost possessive. A cold sensation formed deep within me, though I couldn't articulate precisely why. Later that night, after everyone had departed and the house settled into quietude, I shared my discomfort with Robert. He gently dismissed my concerns. You know Marcus? He murmured, embracing me. He always pushes the envelope with his humor. Sometimes he just misjudges. I wanted to accept Robert's explanation, to believe Marcus had merely made a clumsy joke. Yet, even as I forced a smile and nodded, a persistent unease remained, subtly undermining my peace of mind. In the subsequent weeks, Marcus's comment gradually receded from the forefront of my thoughts, displaced by the rhythms of daily life, family duties, and happier interludes with Robert and the children. However, now and then, during quiet moments, the memory of Marcus's voice and the intensity of his stare would resurface, whispering indistinct warnings I tried to suppress. I had no inkling then just how prescient Marcus's joke would prove to be. In the months following Marcus's disquieting anniversary remark, I attempted to suppress my apprehension amidst everyday routines and the reassuring presence of Robert. Yet, despite my desire to ignore that subtle warning signal, a series of small incidents began to accumulate, each one subtly eroding my confidence and sense of self. It wasn't overt or dramatic, but a slow, insidious process, gradual enough that I scarcely registered the damage until I was already sinking in emotional turmoil. It commenced innocuously, with minor comments Marcus would weave into conversations, seemingly offhand. He'd visit unexpectedly, occasionally staying for dinner, settling in as if our home were his own. He might praise the meal, adding, "You know, Eleanor, Robert is fortunate to have a wife who looks after him so diligently. If anything occurred, he'd never find another woman to tolerate him like you do." Superficially harmless, yet beneath the banter lurked an implication that my value was intrinsically linked to Robert, rendering me almost insignificant without him. These remarks burrowed into my subconscious, subtly weakening my self-assurance. I started to second-guess myself. Was my primary worth truly just as Robert's wife, the supportive figure in the background? Was I essentially invisible apart from him? Robert, often consumed by work pressures, frequently missed these nuances, always attributing Marcus's comments to harmless intent. I began to feel increasingly isolated, unsure how to articulate these subtle slights without appearing overly sensitive. The gradual undermining persisted. Marcus's visits became more frequent as he steadily integrated himself into our lives. During one neighborhood gathering, Marcus casually remarked how I'd be lost without Robert's direction. The attendees chuckled lightly, assuming it was jest, but the words landed heavily on my spirit. Robert squeezed my hand reassuringly, oblivious to the hurt inflicted. Slowly, I felt myself fading into the background. In family discussions, Marcus would interrupt me, gently invalidating my suggestions, subtly prompting Robert and even Chloe and Liam to question my reasoning. At times, I'd see Chloe glance towards Marcus uncertainly, seeking his tacit approval before responding to my thoughts. That particular observation wounded me more profoundly than anything else. Witnessing my own child defer to someone else, marginalizing me within my own family. Soon, even within our home, my voice seemed to diminish. Decisions I once made with certainty now evolved into group deliberations steered by Marcus, who adeptly swayed the family towards his viewpoint. Simple choices, from vacation plans to dinner selections, began aligning with Marcus's preferences, while mine quietly receded, unnoticed. Then arrived a particularly sharp sting during an informal Sunday meal. Marcus showed up unannounced. Partway through dinner, I enthusiastically shared a personal achievement, completing a complex art history research paper I'd been working on for months. I felt proud, eager to share this small triumph. Marcus let out a soft chuckle. "See, Robert, your wife certainly has ample leisure time. I envy how tranquil her life must be." Robert chuckled along, missing the condescending undertone. Liam and Chloe exchanged brief glances but remained silent, likely sensing my distress but unsure how to respond. I sat there quietly, humiliation prickling under my skin. Marcus had, yet again, managed to trivialize something I valued. That night, lying beside Robert, the sense of isolation was crushing. Silent tears traced paths down my cheeks as I pondered how I had become so peripheral, how I had allowed my significance to be defined solely through Robert's lens or Marcus's cutting remarks. It felt as though I were gradually dissolving, becoming a mere shadow of my former self. In those painful, silent moments, I yearned to confide in Robert, in anyone, but explaining the intangible sensation of being slowly erased felt impossible. Instead, I buried the hurt deeper, hoping it would eventually dissipate. I was unaware that this quiet diminishing of my self-worth was merely a prelude. The humiliation that finally shattered my carefully maintained composure occurred during the most vulnerable period imaginable: the reception following Robert's funeral. The day itself was already laden with unbearable sorrow and loss. But Marcus discovered a way to exacerbate my pain, subtly stripping away my dignity when I was least prepared. The formal service had concluded, and close friends and family had reconvened at our home. I felt emotionally depleted, as if the stark reality of Robert's absence had hollowed me out completely. I moved through the rooms numbly, offering weak nods in response to condolences. The endless stream of sympathetic expressions and comforting gestures blurring into meaninglessness. Eventually, craving a brief respite, I slipped away from the crowded living area into the hallway, desperate for a moment of quiet. As I leaned against the cool wall, eyes closed, attempting to gather strength to rejoin the guests, I overheard voices drifting from the nearby kitchen. Familiar voices that instantly rooted me to the spot. Marcus was conversing with close friends, including two couples Robert and I had known for decades, David and Emily, and Peter and Claire. His voice carried effortlessly through the open doorway, relaxed yet commanding, the tone Marcus always adopted when holding court. "You realize Eleanor's going to be utterly adrift now," Marcus stated, his voice laced with feigned solicitude. "Robert constituted her entire world. Without him, she lacks direction, any concept of how to manage independently." A low murmur of assent followed, but Marcus hadn't finished. "Frankly, I'm concerned for her. Robert always handled the significant decisions. I simply don't believe she possesses the capacity to cope on her own, emotionally or logistically." I remained frozen, disbelief stealing the air from my lungs. A burning heat spread across my face, the prickle of humiliation sharp beneath my skin. Marcus, the very person I'd assumed was offering support, was actively undermining me before individuals whose respect I deeply valued. He was systematically dismantling my self-respect in mere moments. "She's quite vulnerable," Marcus continued smoothly, each word a sharp incision. "I recognize it might appear hasty, but truthfully, I'll need to intervene and manage affairs. I'll look after her. Otherwise, she's liable to completely unravel." He chuckled softly, and I could picture his customary, disarming smile that invariably won people over. The subtle assertion of authority in his tone was unmistakable. He had expertly cast himself as my rescuer, persuading everyone present that without his intervention, I would inevitably crumble. "Oh, Marcus, you're such a good man," Claire responded, her voice dripping with sympathy and admiration. "Eleanor is fortunate you're prepared to step up. She's always struck me as somewhat needing protection." Needing protection? The phrase struck me with jarring force, diminishing everything I had ever achieved, the family I nurtured, the quiet resilience I maintained through life's challenges, reducing me to a fragile, helpless figure. A desperate urge surged within me to march into that kitchen, confront Marcus, and assert my own narrative. But something restrained me. A potent mix of raw shame and overwhelming grief left me immobilized, voiceless, unable to defend myself. I felt utterly exposed, stripped of my agency before people who had known me for years. Marcus had skillfully reshaped their perception of me. In that agonizing instant, I understood that the subtle erosion he had perpetrated over months had achieved its goal. Just then, approaching footsteps sounded. Chloe entered the hallway, her expression relaxing slightly upon seeing me. "Mom," she said gently, unaware of the conversation I just endured. "People are asking for you." My heart fractured further, realizing that even my own daughter likely viewed me through Marcus's distorted portrayal. Vulnerable, incapable, requiring care. I forced a semblance of a smile, silently battling the tears threatening to overflow. "I'll join you in a moment," I whispered weakly, unable to meet her gaze. Chloe nodded uncertainly, sensing my distress but unsure how to address it. "All right," she murmured, returning to the bustling living room, leaving me isolated once more. In that aching solitude, I felt profoundly humiliated, divested of dignity and respect, diminished in the eyes of those I held dear. Marcus's quiet betrayal wasn't merely a personal affront. It had reframed my entire identity in the perception of the people most significant to me. I suddenly felt small, unseen, and desperately alone within my own home, mourning not only Robert, but also the person I had always believed myself to be. As I stood there trembling, absorbing the painful truth of Marcus's treachery, something within me began to harden. A quiet determination started to form beneath the layers of humiliation. I didn't yet know the specifics, but I knew one thing with certainty. Marcus had underestimated me for the final time. Yet, even as this nascent resolve took shape, I had no conception of the depths of betrayal still awaiting discovery. Following the funeral, events unfolded rapidly, though not in the manner I anticipated. I had presumed I would have space to grieve, to process my sorrow, and to gradually figure out how to navigate life without Robert. Instead, I found myself being subtly displaced, emotionally, financially, and socially, by the very individuals supposedly aiding my healing. Marcus began appearing more frequently, but now with a nuanced shift in his demeanor. He wasn't merely assisting, he was assuming control. A week after the funeral, Marcus arrived carrying a stack of mail. "Eleanor, let me handle these bills for you. You shouldn't be worrying about this now." He spread them out on the kitchen table. I tried to look, "What's this charge?" He sighed with exaggerated patience. "That's the mortgage payment, darling. See, it's all quite complicated. Don't trouble your pretty head about it. I'll sort it all out, pay everything online, then we can review later when you're feeling stronger." He spoke as if I were a child, incapable of understanding basic household finances. I felt a flush of shame and retreated, letting him take charge. He insisted on organizing Robert's online accounts. "It'll be easier for you, Eleanor, less confusing," he'd said solicitously. A day later, he announced he'd simplified everything with a single login he would manage. In reality, he'd locked me out, gaining complete control while making it seem like a favor. "She's completely lost," I could almost hear him thinking. Poor thing. Robert would have wanted me to step in. He always knew she was too soft, too dependent. It's my duty. And finally, a chance to show everyone what I'm capable of, to correct life's unfairness where Robert got everything. I overheard him talking to Chloe and Liam in the hallway one evening. His voice was low, earnest. "Kids, your mom is incredibly vulnerable right now. She needs our support, but she can't handle stress or complex decisions. I'll take care of the finances, the house stuff. Your job is just to be there for her, comfort her, don't burden her with questions. We need to stick together for your dad." Later, I heard Chloe whisper to Liam, "It feels weird, Liam, like Uncle Marcus has taken over everything." Liam shifted uncomfortably. Maybe But Mom really isn't herself. Someone has to, right? He probably knows best. I saw it happen. Liam tentatively started asking about some of Robert's stocks. Uncle Marcus, didn't Dad say he wanted to hold on to those for... Marcus gently cut him off. Liam, now's not the time for financial debates. The priority is taking care of your mom and securing things. Your dad would trust me on this. Liam flushed and fell silent. Then came the discussion about Robert's car. I'm putting it up for sale, Marcus announced casually. My heart leaped. But Robert loved that car. We had so many memories. Marcus placed a placating hand on my arm. Eleanor, I know it's hard letting go of things, but it's practical. Insurance upkeep. Let's not dwell on it now. You need rest, not worry. I fell silent again, feeling foolish and powerless. Then came the final blow. It was about 2 weeks after the funeral. Marcus asked me to sit with him in the living room. His demeanor was oddly formal. Chloe was there too, sitting quietly across from me, her face tight with anxiety. I could already feel something was wrong. Eleanor, Marcus began, folding his hands like some kind of benevolent businessman. I think it's time we talk about what's next. You can't live in this house alone. It's too much for you. Too many memories. Too many expenses. I've spoken with the lawyer and looked into your options. I stared at him, stunned. What do you mean, my options? I mean, he said gently, I think it would be best if you took some time away. Maybe stayed with your sister Helen for a few months. Let me handle the estate, the house, the finances. I can make sure everything stays in order while you regroup. I looked to Chloe for support. She didn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the floor. You want me to leave my home? I asked, barely able to form the words. No one's forcing you, Marcus said, smiling slightly. But I think it's what Robert would have wanted. You need peace right now. This place, it's not healthy for you. And honestly, there are a lot of complicated matters that need to be handled. You shouldn't be dealing with all this stress. The walls felt like they were closing in. This was the very house Robert and I had poured our lives into building together. Every corner held a piece of our history. The children's height measurements marked on the kitchen door frame. The garden Robert had lovingly cultivated after his own mother passed away. The living room where we danced on our anniversary, barefoot and laughing as if we were still in our 20s. This wasn't merely a structure of bricks and mortar. It was the repository of my life, my past. And now, I was being informed it was too burdensome for me. What stung most wasn't solely Marcus's manipulation. It was the swiftness with which my own family seemed to align with his narrative. Chloe wasn't defending me. Liam hadn't contacted me in days. Friends' check-ins dwindled. Everyone appeared to accept the story. I was vulnerable. I was consumed by grief. I required management. I didn't protest. I didn't weep. I didn't raise my voice. I simply sat there, utterly still. Something deep inside felt as though it fractured, not from fury, but from the quiet, devastating realization that I had been effectively erased. Not by outsiders, but by the very individuals I once cherished and trusted. That evening, I packed a single suitcase. I informed no one of my destination. I required no one's permission. I left behind a note. Unsensational. Just one concise sentence. I am not shattered. I just require space. Please refrain from contacting me. Then, I walked out the front entrance. I didn't glance back. They all likely assumed I was fleeing, too fragile to confront the world without Robert. But they were mistaken. I wasn't running away. I was reclaiming the small fragment of myself that remained. And I would soon unearth something that would completely invert their perception of reality. I didn't travel to my sister Helen's house as Marcus had proposed. I didn't call my children. I left no forwarding details. I took the bag I'd packed and drove for countless hours until I reached a small, unassuming coastal town several states away. A location Robert and I had visited together early in our relationship. Back then, we'd vowed to return someday. I never imagined I would come back unaccompanied, without a plan, lacking clarity, bearing nothing but the sharp claws of grief digging into my chest. I secured a plain room at a somewhat dilapidated inn situated just off the main highway. The room smelled faintly of mildew and stale cigarettes. The carpet was thin and stained, the furniture chipped. Fluorescent lights flickered in the hallway outside, casting eerie shadows. The thin walls offered no buffer from the sounds of the highway or the muffled arguments from the next room. It felt like the edge of the world, a place where people came to disappear. Days blurred into a gray haze of sleepless nights and empty hours. Food tasted like cardboard. Simple tasks felt monumental. This wasn't just a room. It was the physical manifestation of my despair. Within that silence, for the first time since Robert's death, I could finally begin to hear my own thoughts. But the quietude didn't offer solace. It intensified the pain. In that cramped room, I completely unraveled. All the composure I had maintained for weeks, the forced smiles, the polite exchanges, the nods of thanks for sympathy meals I couldn't eat, finally crumbled. I wept for hours, perhaps days, until my throat felt raw and my body ached from suppressing too much for too long. I wasn't merely grieving Robert. I was mourning the life I believed I possessed, the people I thought stood beside me, and the woman I had been before I permitted myself to become invisible. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued me. I'd be running down an endless, dark street, lost and alone. Then I'd turn, and Marcus would be there, smiling that cold smile, with Chloe and Liam beside him, their faces masks of disapproval. I'd try to scream my name, defend myself, but no sound would come out. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in cold sweat, the feeling of utter isolation clinging to me. One bleak evening, huddled on the lumpy bed under the flickering light, the silence pressing in, I dialed my sister Helen's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. The phone rang once, twice. I pictured her concerned voice, the inevitable questions. What could I possibly say? That my brother-in-law had proposed at the grave, then maneuvered me out of my own home while my children watched. Shame washed over me, hot and suffocating. I ended the call before she could answer. Later, I opened my wallet. A few crumpled bills stared back, the last of the cash Robert kept in our emergency drawer. Enough for maybe 3 more days here, tops. Panic seized me. I glanced at my wedding ring. The thought of a pawn shop made me physically sick. I was truly, utterly alone and penniless. It was the deepest point of hopelessness I'd ever known. A small coffee shop stood down the street from the inn. On my 3rd morning there, I ventured out in rumpled clothes, primarily seeking the comfort of something warm to hold. The young woman behind the counter offered a friendly smile, asked for my name, and when I paused, she added gently, "No worries if you don't want to share. I'll just put Mystery Lady." The simple kindness from a complete stranger almost brought me to tears right there. It pierced through the numbness I had wrapped around myself. I took my coffee to a window seat and gazed out at the turbulent gray ocean waves crashing onto the shore. And then, I started to write. Not anything coherent or planned, just fragmented thoughts, resurfacing memories, raw pain, unanswered questions. I scribbled on napkins, old receipts, the margins of a discarded newspaper. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel entirely adrift, but let there be no mistake, I was still at the lowest point. That evening, returning to the inn, I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I reached into my overnight bag and pulled out Robert's old leather portfolio, the one he always carried on trips, the one I derided him for, the one I had almost discarded before leaving my home. My fingers brushed against a section of the lining that felt loose. Intrigued, I tugged at it gently. It yielded, revealing a hidden pocket. Tucked inside was his old journal, one I hadn't laid eyes on in many years. Why conceal it? My heart began to pound violently against my ribs. I hadn't opened it yet. I hadn't felt ready. But something about that night, the profound silence, the persistent ache, the sheer, overwhelming emptiness, signaled it was time. When I finally turned the first page, my breath caught in my throat. Robert's handwriting was instantly recognizable, his familiar, careful loops, yet imbued with a novel sense of gravity. The entries weren't extensive. Some comprised only a paragraph, others a mere sentence, but each drew me further into his thoughts, unveiling a reality I was unprepared to confront. The entries began months before his fatal aneurysm. Robert had been worried, not just about work or his well-being, but specifically about Marcus. Initially, the references were somewhat oblique. I disliked the way Marcus looks at her. Witnessed it more than once now. Confronted Marcus about his tone with Eleanor again. He dismissed it with a laugh, but I detected the sharpness beneath. He inquired about Eleanor's situation should anything happen to me. Presented it as a jest, but it didn't feel like one. My pulse quickened. The more I read, the more evident it became. Robert had known. Perhaps not the full scope, but he had sensed something profoundly wrong, something almost predatory in how Marcus had begun to infiltrate our lives, drawing closer month by month. Robert had attempted to shield me, but had done so discreetly without causing me alarm. Then, nestled between two pages, I discovered the envelope, addressed simply Eleanor in Robert's distinct script. Inside lay a letter. I unfolded it with unsteady hands. It was dated merely 2 weeks prior to his death. My Eleanor, if you are reading this, then I am no longer here. I deeply regret not sharing these concerns with you directly, but I didn't wish to cause you anxiety. I've had an unsettling intuition for some time now. Not regarding my health, but concerning Marcus. He isn't the man he once was. He has been pressuring me regarding our finances, probing about the will, the house, about you. I don't want you to be alarmed, but I have instituted certain changes. The lawyer is aware. Should anything befall me, Marcus possesses no legal claim to our estate. You are fully protected, Eleanor. I have transferred assets into a trust solely in your name. The children are beneficiaries, but Marcus is explicitly excluded. For the comprehensive details, documents, and contact information for the correct attorney, I have mailed a separate, sealed letter to our old vacation P.O. box in this town. Box 117. Please retrieve it. He will understand when to provide it. Do not allow him to diminish you. You have always possessed the greater strength between us. You merely forget sometimes. Look after yourself. Rediscover your voice. You are deserving of peace. My love always, Robert. I pressed the letter to my chest, engulfed by a wave of intense grief, swiftly followed by something else entirely. Relief, vindication, a surge of nascent strength. Robert had perceived what I had missed. He had trusted my instincts, even when I was unaware I needed validation. I hadn't been irrational. I hadn't misinterpreted Marcus's intentions. Robert had provided me with a guide, an escape route, a path forward. The following morning, my immediate destination was the post office. My hands shook as I provided the clerk with the P.O. box number Robert had indicated. She returned momentarily, handing me a substantial, sealed envelope, addressed to me in Robert's unmistakable handwriting. My fingers clumsily tore it open right there on the spot. Inside lay copies of trust agreements, meticulous instructions, account identifiers, and the name and address of a lawyer unfamiliar to me. Arthur Vance. It contained the law firm's details, specific account information, and a legally executed document confirming the transfer of control over our assets to myself and our children, incorporating a highly specific stipulation. Marcus was to possess absolutely no authority, claim, or access whatsoever. Should he attempt any interference, the attorney was explicitly directed to obstruct him immediately. As I absorbed the contents, a profound internal shift began. The shattered woman who had aimlessly wandered the shoreline at night, uncertain of her place, started to recede. In her stead, a different version of myself emerged. Steadier, more focused, quieter, yet no longer silenced. Robert hadn't merely safeguarded me with affection. He had protected me with foresight, strategic planning, and unwavering faith in my true character, even when I had temporarily lost sight of it myself. That night, for the first time in weeks, I experienced sleep. Not profoundly restful, perhaps, but imbued with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since the day Robert died. The next morning, I gathered my belongings, settled my bill at the inn, and drove directly to the law office specified in the letter. I notified no one of my plans. I didn't contact Chloe. I didn't contact Liam. I was finished with justifications. I entered the lawyer's office shortly after 9. It resided within a respectable brick building downtown, understated but conveying solidity and discretion. I still wore the same clothes I'd left home in weeks prior. Robert's letters clutched tightly in my pocket like a talisman. The receptionist glanced up. "May I assist you?" I drew a steadying breath. "I'm Eleanor Ainsworth. My husband Robert recently passed away. He indicated I would find something pertinent here." Her demeanor instantly transformed. "Ah, yes. Please wait one moment." Within minutes, I was seated opposite Mr. Arthur Vance, a composed gentleman with kind eyes and silvering hair. "My condolences on your loss," he began gently. "Robert was a fine man, very thoughtful. He was determined to ensure you were well provided for." He retrieved a substantial file from a locked cabinet, placing it on the desk between us. He opened the file and started methodically laying out documents, copies of the trust, amendments to the will, the various protective measures Robert had established. As Mr. Vance elucidated the details, something within me clicked into place, akin to emerging from a prolonged, hazy slumber. Robert had ensured Marcus was entirely blocked. The trust structure was inviolable. My name was clearly designated on everything essential. I hadn't forfeited everything after all. I had merely been manipulated into believing I had. Marcus's hold over me wasn't founded in legality. It was purely emotional manipulation, and that enchantment was definitively broken. Upon leaving the office, I didn't break down. I drove to a different motel, slightly more presentable, located off the main highway. Utilizing some initial funds dispersed by Mr. Vance, I acquired an inexpensive prepaid phone and a second-hand laptop. For the next 3 days, I dedicated myself entirely to the task at hand. I frequented the local library, poring over information on trusts and probate law at a public terminal, diligently taking notes. I made numerous calls, initially to Mr. Vance for clarifications, my voice trembling at first, but gaining confidence with each query resolved. Then, I contacted a new financial advisor recommended by Vance. I navigated complex online banking platforms, meticulously establishing new, highly secure accounts under the trust's auspices, initiating fund transfers, and resetting every conceivable password. The successful transfer of the first significant sum felt like a tremendous personal victory. In the evenings, weary but resolute, I purchased a basic spiral notebook and commenced writing. not just expressions of grief, but strategic planning. I documented every instance of manipulation, every falsehood. I mentally rehearsed potential confrontations with Marcus, formulating my responses, rediscovering my inner voice within the quiet anonymity of the motel room. I embarked on long walks along the coastline, allowing the crisp sea air to clear my thoughts, listening to Robert's favorite jazz recordings, permitting myself to acknowledge the anger, but consciously redirecting it into focused determination. One afternoon, seeking respite, I found myself visiting the small local art history museum. Surrounded by historical artifacts, I felt a renewed connection to my former self. The scholar, the individual I was before Robert, before Marcus. It served as a quiet affirmation of my independent identity. The path wasn't without obstacles. Attempting to revoke Marcus's access to a jointly held utility account turned into a frustrating ordeal. The company's website repeatedly malfunctioned. I endured nearly 2 hours on hold with customer service, my patience fraying, panic rising. I can't manage this. He's already won, the desperate thought echoed. But then, I drew a deep, deliberate breath, recalled Robert's unwavering belief in my capabilities, and calmly, persistently reiterated the situation to the representative. Finally, the agent confirmed Marcus's access had been terminated. I concluded the call, my hands unsteady but fueled by a surge of empowering adrenaline. I could indeed handle this. One morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror and scarcely recognized the woman looking back. Yet for the first time, this wasn't unsettling. My gaze seemed sharper, my posture more resolute. I wasn't smiling, but I no longer appeared lost. I looked awakened. That same afternoon, I indulged in some retail therapy. Nothing extravagant, just a well-fitting blouse, a new pair of jeans, and sturdy shoes without worn-down heels. I visited a walk-in salon nearby for a haircut. The stylist inquired if I was recovering from a recent breakup. I managed a small smile and replied, "Something along those lines." By the time I departed that motel, I bore little resemblance to the dazed, grief-stricken woman who had checked into the dilapidated inn weeks earlier. I hadn't resolved everything, but I possessed a clear plan. I wasn't prepared for a direct confrontation with Marcus just yet. I wasn't ready for scrutiny. What I needed was continued silence. Not the silence born of sorrow, but the silence of calculated strategy. Because henceforth, every action I took would be intentional, every step measured. He presumed I had disappeared because I was shattered. He was gravely mistaken. I had withdrawn because I had finally remembered my own strength. There exists a particular kind of fortitude that doesn't manifest through loud pronouncements or dramatic actions. It's the type that cultivates itself quietly, behind closed doors, unobserved. That was the resilience I unearthed in the subsequent weeks. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly to anyone not paying close attention. A denied login here, a formal legal notice there. Quiet impediments Marcus couldn't directly attribute to me, yet which steadily dismantled the facade of control he had so confidently constructed. First, he attempted to log into the estate's primary financial platform, the very system he'd assured everyone he was overseeing on my behalf. Access denied, twice. Subsequently, an alert was routed to my attorney instead of him. He likely initially dismissed it as a technical glitch. It wasn't. Then came the issue with the accounts themselves. Funds he presumed were inaccessible or tied up in probate had been seamlessly transferred into a secure trust. My trust. Automatic bill payments ceased. Credit cards linked to the household account were suddenly declined. His name was discreetly excised from all remaining joint documentation. Marcus began making frantic calls. To lawyers, financial advisors, even Robert's former colleagues, desperately trying to ascertain what had changed. But the pathways he had once navigated with such ease were now barricaded, locked tight, and he no longer possessed the keys. Chloe contacted me again, leaving a voicemail this time. "Mom, Uncle Marcus is saying something strange is happening with the will. He mentioned possible fraud or interference. Are you all right? Maybe we should talk." I chose not to reply. "Not yet. Let him speculate. Let them all puzzle over my whereabouts and actions." The attorney overseeing the trust informed me that Marcus had formally requested copies of the estate documents, ostensibly to clarify Eleanor's intentions. The request was firmly rejected. Legally, he possessed no entitlement. That specific piece of news elicited my first genuine smile in weeks. For the first time since Robert's death, I could palpably feel it. The shift in power. The burden that had been crushing me was now squarely upon Marcus's shoulders, and he had no idea who had placed it there. That uncertainty is what most terrifies individuals like him. The loss of control without understanding how or when it slipped away. I pictured him agitatedly pacing my living room, rummaging through papers, anxiously checking the mail, contacting everyone in his network, attempting to find the loophole in the system that had excluded him. I imagined him slowly, agonizingly realizing this wasn't a mere system malfunction or bureaucratic error. It was me. He had severely underestimated the woman he had attempted to erase. And now he was learning, gradually and painfully, that I hadn't simply vanished. I had retreated into silence to prepare my next steps, and soon my invisibility would end. 2 months after my departure, I returned, not with dramatic flair or confrontation. I didn't burst into the house. I didn't raise my voice. I merely walked through the front door on a Tuesday afternoon while Marcus was preoccupied with a phone call. The expression that crossed his face upon seeing me, a mixture of sheer confusion and dawning fear, provided a satisfaction far exceeding any imagined scenario of revenge. "Eleanor," he stammered, rising uncertainly, as if questioning my very presence. "Where on earth have you been? We've all been terribly worried." I raised a hand, calm and composed. "Spare me the performance." He fell silent. "I know precisely what you've done," I stated, placing a substantial file of documents onto the coffee table. "You attempted to seize control of Robert's estate. You told everyone I was incapable, that I required your intervention to manage everything." He opened his mouth again, likely poised to weave another fabrication. I shook my head firmly. "I possess the trust documents, the account records, the legal correspondence, every falsehood, every request, every denial meticulously documented. I don't require a confession, Marcus. I simply need you to vacate my house." His face flushed a deep red. "Eleanor, just listen to yourself. You're distraught. You've endured an ordeal. Grief is clouding your judgment. You sound irrational. Robert would never have desired this conflict, these accusations. You're fracturing the family. Perhaps you should consult someone, a professional. I could help arrange." His eyes fell upon the thick file, then met my steady, unwavering gaze. His bluster evaporated. He recognized the futility. You will come to regret this," he sputtered, a weak, final attempt at intimidation. His words trailed off into silence. For a tense moment, he just stood there, jaw tight, mind scrambling for a response. But there was none. He knew it was over. I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. His power had vanished. Without exchanging another word, I walked past him and proceeded into the kitchen. My kitchen. I filled the kettle, a familiar routine performed hundreds of times before. The house retained its familiar scent, yet it no longer felt oppressive. It felt like it belonged to me again. By the time I turned back, Marcus had departed. The front door slammed shut, the sound echoing in the suddenly expansive silence. My legs felt unsteady. I sank onto the nearest armchair. A profound wave of trembling relief washed over me, so potent it left me momentarily breathless. Then followed an immense weariness, settling deep within my bones, accompanied by a lingering tremor of residual fear. Tears began to stream down my face, not tears of sorrow this time, but of catharsis, of a battle confronted and ultimately won. I had done it. I had actually stood my ground. Moments later, the aggressive sound of his car engine starting pierced the quiet. Peeking through the window blinds, I observed him parked further down the street, furiously speaking into his phone, his face contorted with anger. I could almost sense the vitriol emanating through the receiver as he undoubtedly contacted Chloe and Liam, desperately attempting to salvage his narrative with last-minute distortions. She's lost her mind. We need to intervene. She's destroying everything. But I knew that providing them with the lawyer's comprehensive report the previous day had fortified them against this final onslaught. I initially believed the confrontation signified the conclusion. I assumed that with Marcus's departure, I would finally achieve closure. However, life often orchestrates its own form of resolution. And it arrived not through vengeance, but through the stark revelation of truth. Approximately 2 weeks after Marcus vacated the house, my attorney contacted me with an update. I anticipated something routine, perhaps final documentation or another signature required, but his tone conveyed an uncharacteristic gravity. "We've received the findings from our forensic accounting request," he stated carefully. "There is something significant you need to review." He transmitted the files later that afternoon. The contents left me stunned. Marcus hadn't merely attempted to manipulate the will and estate following Robert's death. He had been actively interfering before Robert passed away, evidenced by flagged banking transactions and archived email communications. Marcus had made numerous attempts, some subtle, others audacious, to transfer assets into joint accounts under his own name. He had even consulted a separate lawyer without Robert's knowledge, misrepresenting himself as Robert's proxy, trying to gain premature access to trust details. However, the most chilling aspect was the timeline. Robert had finalized the trust updates and penned that crucial letter to me mere days after Marcus's last documented attempt at interference. Robert had been aware. He recognized the imminent danger and had acted just in time. The complete report painted an undeniable portrait, not merely of avarice, but of calculated, premeditated deception. It also confirmed the gambling debts were substantially larger and more pressing than Marcus had ever disclosed to Robert, revealing a desperate underlying motive. Marcus wasn't a grieving sibling striving to protect his family. He was an individual who perceived an opportunity within his brother's perceived vulnerability and sought to exploit it entirely. I spent a considerable amount of time absorbing the implications of the evidence. The sheer weight of his deceit felt immense. I possessed the grounds to pursue further action, file criminal charges, expose his actions publicly, but I chose not to. That form of justice felt performative, centered around creating noise. Instead, I opted to allow the quiet, inherent power of the truth to take effect. I forwarded the comprehensive forensic report to my children. No added commentary, no emotional overlay, simply the unvarnished facts. And then, I waited. Calls from acquaintances began sporadically over the next few days. "Eleanor, dear, how are you holding up? Marcus expressed such concern, mentioned you disappeared. Weren't quite yourself." Patiently, but firmly, I addressed each query. "There's more to the situation than Marcus portrayed. I am managing now." With my closest friend, Emily, I arranged to meet for coffee. I calmly presented the key findings from the report. Her expression shifted from worried concern to profound shock, then deep embarrassment. "Oh, Eleanor, I am so incredibly sorry. We simply accepted his version. Her apology, along with those from a few other trusted friends, began the process of repairing some relational damage. A week elapsed before Liam called. It was late, past midnight. Mom. His voice was heavy with remorse. I had no idea. I promise, I had no idea. I believe you, Liam, I responded softly. A long silence followed. He clearly struggled to articulate his feelings. I gently guided the conversation. Liam, I understand this is difficult. It's not merely about being misled by his lies. It's about recognizing how susceptible grief and trust can make us to manipulation. It's a crucial lesson for all of us, to truly perceive the individual, not just their circumstances. I heard his unsteady intake of breath on the line. A sense of understanding seemed to resonate. Then Chloe called, her voice already thick with tears before she even spoke my name. I'm so sorry, she choked out. I trusted him. I allowed him to speak for you. I didn't even properly inquire if you were okay. I let her express her remorse for a moment. Chloe, I said finally, my tone gentle yet firm. I hear your apology, but it's essential you understand that your silence, your acquiescence, it played a part in making me feel erased. It inflicted deep hurt. I require time to process that, and you need time to comprehend how it transpired. We cannot simply gloss over it. It wasn't immediate forgiveness, but it marked the beginning of an honest path toward reconciliation. The ensuing weeks were characterized by quietude. Chloe initiated texting every few days, sharing small, everyday things, recipes, anecdotes, photographs of Robert I hadn't encountered before. She refrained from asking to visit directly, but the unspoken question lingered. Liam sent a handwritten letter, an unexpected gesture. In it, he addressed not only Marcus's deceit, but also his own culpability, how he'd observed my diminishing presence without intervening, mistaking silence for respect. One Sunday afternoon, several weeks later, Chloe and Liam arrived at the house. A residual awkwardness still permeated the atmosphere. Chloe brought an old family photo album. We sat together on the living room floor, turning the pages. Images of Robert making comical faces, past holidays, school events. A shared memory elicited a tentative smile, then a soft chuckle, eventually blossoming into genuine shared laughter. It wasn't a return to how things once were, but it signified progress built this time upon a foundation of acknowledged truth. A few weeks after that, I found myself standing alone in the backyard garden, the space Robert had tended with quiet dedication every Saturday morning. His tomato plants, as always, had grown exuberantly tall, spilling over their supports as if asserting their vitality. The large rosemary bush remained wild and unkempt, just as he preferred it. I ran my fingers through the fragrant leaves, inhaling deeply. The familiar aroma struck me like a poignant memory I hadn't realized I missed so acutely. Robert, his steadfast presence, the life we had constructed together, layer upon layer, season after season. Yet, the memory no longer inflicted the sharp pain it once did. It didn't leave me feeling empty. I had returned to this place, bearing more than just grief. I carried clarity. The silence I had once dreaded had transformed into my sanctuary. Within it, I had discerned the truth about Marcus, about my children, and most crucially, about myself. I was not the vulnerable woman they had perceived, the grieving widow deemed too fractured to stand. I was still standing. More than that, I felt deeply rooted. I had discovered something more profound than mere closure. I had found tranquility. Not because everything was suddenly resolved, perfect, or even equitable, but because I had successfully reclaimed what was inherently mine all along: my voice, my intrinsic worth, and the fundamental right to occupy space in the world without seeking permission. As the sun descended towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I noticed one of Robert's wind chimes stirring gently in the evening breeze. It had remained silent throughout my absence. Now it produced a soft, melodic tune, perhaps a farewell, or possibly a welcome home. I settled onto the weathered wooden bench. Beside me rested my new notebook. I opened it. One page held a preliminary sketch for a redesigned flower bed intended to replace Robert's overgrown patch, not to obliterate his memory, but to integrate my own presence. Another listed details for a local college's landscape design course starting the following month. Tucked further within was a half-composed email draft addressed to the art history department of the university, inquiring about the possibility of resuming my postgraduate research after all these years. I hadn't definitively chosen which path to pursue first. Perhaps the solo trip to Tuscany, tending the garden, or delving back into my studies. But the crucial element was that the choice rested entirely with me. I reached for the pruning shears Robert had left hanging near the shed, felt their familiar, solid weight in my hand, and walked purposefully towards the neglected, tangled rose bushes. It was time to begin clearing the path, both in the garden and in my life. I was no longer the woman waiting to be chosen. I was the woman who reclaimed her own narrative. This story didn't conclude with retribution or dramatic victory. It culminated in something far more potent: peace. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you've ever felt unseen or diminished, please share your own story in the comments below.